So welcome to another tutorial on YouTube. We're going to make these lovely marbles. I'm kind of excited about this one. We have some crazy colors in there, reds and oranges and yellows, and then we have a really dramatic background of the really dark, and it offsets that color a little bit as well. Now I'm just going to jump right into it. I'm using Polychromos pencils today, and I'm also using a pastel mat. This is the anthracite color, and I chose the anthracite because the background on this is really dark and it'll be easier to cover. So I'm going to fast forward, and I'm just going to use my Polychromos black, and I'm just going to use the small circle method and cover this whole background with black. Okay, so some of the major areas are already taken care of with my black, and I decided to do that because I didn't want to use pan pastels. This is a fairly small portrait. It's about 4.5 by 3, something around those lines, maybe 3.5, but it's not very big, so coloring it in with colored pencils really not a big deal. Now if it was a lot bigger, I'd be using my black pan pastel. The anthracite is a little bit more gray than it is black, and it's not as rich in color, but it does make a really good base for some dark portraits. Now I would say if you have something like Art Again paper that's black, that would be a really good paper to use, or any kind of black paper really. Now I'm just going through and making sure I touch up some of these areas. Look through these reflections and choose where your black areas are going to be. So there's one here. We have an area right here that's black. Might as well do it while we have it out, right? And try not to lose your reflections, like your shining parts, which there's a spot right here that I have marked out. So we'll just keep that. And I'm doing circular motions to try to get a nice even coverage on my paper. And then we have a couple of shiny areas up here, and then even beyond those shiny spots. Now some of these we can't really get into until we start to shade in some gray and really work the colors. So I'm actually going to color this here a little bit darker and just look around. This part's a little bit darker as well. And once you get those mapped out, let's go ahead and use some of our grays. And we will need our white as well. You know, I think I missed a spot here with the black. Let's put in some darker areas right here. And we'll blend those out with the gray as well. Okay. So now let's work on this area that's right here. And it's a little bit more bright, so we're going to do a cold gray and a warm gray. Let's see, what do I want? So I have my warm gray 2 and my cold gray 4. So let's start with our, let's go ahead with our cold gray 4. And I'm going to base this area out. And I'm not going to push hard, but I want to get that, just that base in. And don't lose into your marble there. And it's okay if we kind of go off into this black area a little bit. It's not going to hurt it. That will actually blend it. It's a very fuzzy area, so it's out of focus. It's like a shine, but it's out of focus. So that will actually be helpful to blend it down into that black a little bit more. And then the warm gray 2 is a bit brighter. So if you can look at your picture, you'll see that there's a lighter shape within this shine. And it's like right in here. So we're just going to add that. And then we'll actually make it a little bit brighter with some white. Now we don't want it to be super sharp. We don't want a sharp contrast. We want it to be a little bit fuzzy and out of focus. Okay? So that looks good already. Now let's move down and we will do, let's use our, what is that, the warm gray, no, cold gray 4. Didn't know what I was looking at for a second. And we're going to do it right here in this area. So there's a few differences in this area as well with shapes. Cross over into that black. See how it's making it look kind of fuzzy and out of focus? Blends that really nicely. Even cross over into this black area as well. So what's special about this particular shadow or reflection shadow, it's got like this split in between where it's just slightly lighter. So I'm using my warm gray 2 and I'm just going to add a very light layer where that split is. Okay, so even though that's lighter, if you look closer, there's a gradient where this is lighter and then towards the middle it's darker. So let's add our brighter color, our warm gray 2. Down at this bottom. And we're going to lift up a little bit. Don't put a whole lot of pressure going towards the middle. We want to keep that darker. Okay, so if you find that there is too much, that there's too harsh of a contrast between some of these, take your black, like right here. Say we want to fuzz it up just a little bit. I'm going to go really lightly with a circular motion, a circular stroke, and we're going to just very gently take some of that color and darken it up. And then also this area here, you can do the same thing very lightly. You don't want to put a whole lot of pressure, and I'm actually laying my pencil on its side just about to give it a little bit more of a broader pencil surface area for the pencil to go down. And it is just very lightly adding some of that black. See how it made that gradient, and it's not super overbearing. But then if that gets to be troublesome, let's go back in with our cold gray. My letters are all worn off of this, so it's really hard for me to see what I'm looking at. So cold gray 4, we'll come in and just gently blend that even more. See? Looks great. And let's even put some more in here. Looks great. So as we move along, oh, I missed a spot. There's a really bright white right in here. So you want to watch your hand. You don't want to put your hand on the, like right on your piece, or you'll start smearing it and smudging it everywhere. Let me grab a piece of paper to protect it. So I'm going to put this piece of paper here just to stop my hand from maybe smudging it. We just don't want that. And then let's put our white. We have a very, very bright white right here. And let's see, we've got like this crazy white shape, but it's not just a shape. It is out of focus. So we want to gently fuzz those edges, but make sure it's super intense right here. So I'm going to use a lot of pressure right here to make sure I fill in that tooth. And then I'm going to do the small circles around the edges to make it a little bit more fuzzy. Okay, looks great. We are moving right along. Okay, so this is a bit darker. It's almost like this part here, but it's a little less noticeable. So let's go ahead and base this out using the same cold gray 4. It's going to be really hard too. These are super round. They're like perfect circles. So even though we traced, or however you got your lines onto your paper, which I trace, however you got them on there, it's probably not going to be perfect, but that's okay. We're practicing, right? All right. All right, and then let's also use our warm gray 2. We're going to do the same thing. So if you look, this is super white right here, and then we're just going to take the warm gray 2. We're going to kind of make like a triangle coming down this way. And I keep coming back up to here because this is like the brighter piece right here. And it sort of fades into this area. This is a little bit lighter. And then we've got some odd shapes down in here. Now if you don't want to do those odd shapes, you don't have to. You can just add a few little randoms. Just sort of adds to the piece, you know? And then go back through with your cold gray 4 and get those edges softened up. Okay. Let's see. Let's poke our white in here. A very, very light, bright white. This is pretty light too. I wouldn't say it's white. It might be more of a cold gray 2. Let's actually make this a cold gray 2. See, it's not quite white. Looks like there might be a speck of white in there that's a bit brighter. Let's just put 2 little areas, kind of stipple in some texture there. We'll color in around it and make sure we get the black in there. So sometimes with reverse drawing, if you want to do some reverse drawing, what you can do is add to this piece, if you look real close at that tiny shine that we're working on, there's a little bit of a separation, like right in here. So this is sort of reverse drawing. If you go in and just kind of take out that area, you see how it separated it. And then we can go back through and, you know, put these little indents in the sides here, give it a little bit more character in that shine. It also gets like that towards this end a little bit, and do a little bit more reverse drawing in here. And then it fades out. So let's take our cold gray too. If you need to sharpen your pencil, do so. We are working in a very, very small area. So there's no use in trying to work with a blunt tip if you can sharpen it and get like the exact shape that you want. And then we'll just shade this. There, tapered it. Looks great. Okay, there is another shape here too. So let's take our cold gray again, our cold gray 2, and we're just going to very lightly add that little bit of a shine there. And that's all that is. It's just super light, nothing to it. And then let's also feather these a little bit with our circular motions. Just gonna add a little bit of a darker area here. Maybe add some more in here and blend this edge a little bit better. Looks pretty good. Okay, so this area is a little bit lighter. I still want to base it out in the cold gray 4. Let's start on this side. Work our way. I avoided this little spot there. It's probably white. I'm not seeing it. It's probably white though. Or a cold gray 2. So I'm basing this out in the cold gray 4. And I'm using the circular motion to get a nice even tone across for the base. Okay, and then let's use our warm gray 2. And we are going to add it. It's much lighter here than this part. So we might even add some cold gray 2 to that. And this isn't a straight edge either, so you want to make sure you get those little like bubblies on there, because it's not completely straight. And the shape kind of ends right here, but then it continues up this way. There's like a separation. And then it blends. Let's add a little bit of cold gray 2 on this edge. So in most sets that I work with, the cold grays tend to have a more blue undertone than the warm grays. Warm grays tend to have a little bit more of a brown undertone. I don't know if that's how they make it, but that's just how I perceive it. And everybody might be different. That's just how I see it though. Okay, so now we need to really work on getting some of this blended out. So I have my cold gray 4 again. I'm going to start down here and I'm just going to push up into this shine. See how it's kind of taking away some of that brightness. It's adding a little bit more of a gradient to it. I'm going to keep doing that. I need to wash off my phone. And actually, let's take this Oops. Cold Gray 4. Boy, I cannot get that name down. I just keep having to look at it, and I don't understand why. It's crazy. Cold Gray 4. Right? Okay, so let's actually just base the rest of this out in that Cold Gray 4. And I'm using my circles just to get a nice base tone. And then I'm actually going to use some black. And we're going to hold it like way up high here and use just about the side of our tip here, because I don't want to go in like super heavy like we did here. We're just sort of blending this and adding a light layer. Okay, so let's add a little here. There's a little bit here. Now don't get worried if you see some of the tooth of the paper. The one thing with pastel matte that I really love is that you can go back through with other colors. It blends, it's very forgiving, and you're going to see some tooth here because we're going dark over light. But what we're going to do is come back through with our Cold Gray 4 like we just had, and it's going to really blend it all together, and you're not even going to be able to see those tooth marks, or the way it's going on right now. Now if you're using something like a Bristol, you may not see it as bad, but if you are using the pastel matte, this might be freaking you out right now. You might be having a meltdown. Just chill, because it will work out. Okay, so Cold Gray 4, let's go ahead and let's lightly do the circles, and let's just start blending. And you see how it's lightening up that black, but then we're keeping that nice tone, that darker tone, and it's just blending it. We're just pushing it around, and it's really just mooshing the colors together. Let's do it over here too. Okay. Got a couple white spots. Put one right there. There's a little one over here. There is one right there as well. We don't want them to be super harsh either. So if you put a spot there, go around them a few times very lightly and fuzz those edges up. Okay. There is also a really bright area down here. So let's put that little square, and then there's a shape and a spot, and then let's go around them with our white to just fuzz them up a little bit. Perfect. Okay, so I'm seeing a darker, it's like a darker line through here. So I'm going to take my black and I'm just going to draw a thin line. And then I'm going to use my warm gray 2, and there's a brighter area that's right here. This is such good practice. Like, this is such a smooth surface. Even with these, I mean, when we start to get into like the crazier colors and the changes and just how shiny it is, I mean, you're going to see some wacky things happening in there with shapes, and it's just so abstract that when you put all the abstract pieces together, it just works. And then take your black 2. Let's go, there's another shape right here that's a little bit darker. Kind of comes in this way. And let's darken up around here. Again, if you're seeing the tooth, go back through with your Cold Gray 4 and just go over top of those areas, and it will blend. Okay, let's finish off this area. This is an interesting part. So this is very black, this is very black. We've got a lot of shapes in here, but they're like super black, so they're really hard to see. So I'm actually going to base this out in black and leave some of that available for my other colors. Let's use some cold gray 4. I'm just going to come in here very lightly like this, and then even over top of that black, very gently. Okay, and then we're going to go back over top of it, because if you look, this part and this part, they are not the same like they are right now. They're not the same intensity. This is clearly brighter. So let's go back in with our black and go over top of, it's almost non-existent, like this shape that's right here. It's almost not even there, it's so dark. So we'll just go over top of those colors, those grays. And then go over top of it again with your cold gray 4. Do you see how it's like really turning that cold gray 4 into a darker tone? But you can still see the gray. So it's not washing it out completely. It's not, it's you know, really just giving it a nice shade. And then get your white, because there is a bright spot right here. So let's put our white. It's like a circle, but then it kind of tapers. So fuzz up those sides a little bit. And that looks good. Maybe make this a little bit darker, a little brighter there. So on the other side, it looks like it's a much brighter part. Let's start with our cold gray 2. Let's come in here. Base that out. And then this is like super bright white. And it's kind of a strange thing. So we've got kind of like 3 fingers that are kind of protruding from that. So I have it white. Make sure your pencil is very sharp for this. So we have a shape in here that's black, and then it comes up and across, and then we've got to get in between those little fingers that we've got in there. Okay, let's darken that part up just a little bit. We'll fuzz those edges in, maybe use our cold gray 4, make that a little bit darker. Let's even go over that a little bit, and then let's go ahead and brighten it up again. I love layering. This is the warm gray 2. Just going to come in like this, and then let's get our cold gray 2, and let's make it bright. If you don't think that that is bright enough, which I think it could probably go a little bit brighter, let's use some white, and let's just place it in here. That way it just shows the difference. You can even put a line of white right here. And we should probably, whoops, blend those edges. Blend those edges so that it's not so crisp. Oh, my pencil's rolling around. Okay. Pretty good. I like it. Let's move on to this big area right here, this big chunk. So let me see here. We've got, this is very dark, and it comes down here to this reflection. And this is a sharp. Sometimes whenever we're tracing, we can lose some information. So sometimes we have to eyeball it. So I just made that up by looking at my reference photo. That's why it's so important to look at your reference photo so that you know where you're at and that you can really measure, you know, your lines and everything and make sure you got it right. So just like before, this area is going to be, you know, your cold gray 4. We're going to keep blending around, adding some spots in there. It's all pretty much the same. You're just looking at shapes and shadows, and then you are going to just work with those shapes and shadows and try to get them out of focus. You want to keep layering just like we did on this whole thing. So I'm going to finish this side out, and it's the same stuff. Just watch your shapes and shadows, and I will meet you back to start this one. So now we're ready to start the marbles. The marbles are about the same intensity of gray, just about, along the edges and the whites, and then you're going to have a lot of darks like the black and everything in here, and you want to just pay close attention to the shine marks. And then of course we have this big bright orange and yellow streak through here. We may actually start with that just because it's a little bit different, the rest of it, and we'll just kind of change up the scenery a little bit. So let's start with the orange piece on this one. I'm going to grab all my pencils that I think are going to be in it. And then put my grays aside. Sharpen up your pencils. Okay, so I gotta think of a good base color. Out of all of these, I would think that we would want to start with something a little bit lighter. And I'm looking on the colored pencil picker app. If you haven't used it, I kind of just like scale around to find different colors, see kind of different shadowed areas. I mostly argue with this app, but that comes with time whenever you start to learn different, different colors and how to mix them. Okay, I'm actually just going to start then with the dark cadmium orange. And I'm just going to start by adding the outline. I'm going to deepen all this up. So I wouldn't worry too much about getting it like perfect right now. So it seems this is a bit brighter than the underside. We still want to keep this as our base color. But right now I'm just going to use some small circles. We're going to try to get a nice even fill on this part. And then this is also a little bit brighter. Okay, then for the lighter areas, I'm going to use the dark cadmium yellow. And this is going to take quite a bit of blending. So we'll just start off with this. We're going to put a very light layer, and you see it's going to make it a little bit brighter because that's what we want. We're just going to kind of keep flip-flopping in between the different colors. The dark cadmium orange and the dark cadmium yellow, just to get it a little bit brighter. And then you want to watch too, even though this is like orange, it's a little bit brighter along this bottom ridge here. And then we'll just add a little bit over here. So go ahead and mix with your dark cadmium, right? Dark cadmium orange. We're going to go very lightly over top of that. And that's just going to soften that yellow a little bit, brighten that orange a little bit. They're both warm colors, so if you are familiar with your color wheel and the warm colors versus the cool colors, these are both warm colors, so they mix really well together. And then darken this up. See, we're already starting to get like a shade brighter. So go ahead back through with your dark cadmium yellow. And we're just going to add a light layer again, just like we did before. And really, honestly, like I said, we're flip-flopping, but you're mixing these colors. You're making them brighter. You're just playing around basically and just mushing them together. We're not using a whole lot of pressure either. We can come back in with our dark cadmium orange very lightly over top of that color again. And then let's look a little deeper. Now that we have that pretty much mapped out, there is also like a shine right in here, and it's a little bit more yellowy. That's like a round. These little tiny details are what make your art pieces look really cool. So paying attention to that is crucial. So you have to train your eyes to see those tiny, tiny details. And it can be difficult at first, but once you start noticing, like once you start mixing colors and once you start like noticing the details, the very minor details, it's those details that will help make your picture pop. Now, you can drive yourself crazy too, so don't you don't want to do that, but try to train your eye to see these things naturally while you're coloring and while you're creating a piece. So I just want to lighten this up over here a little wee bit. It's not very much, but it's enough to make it look a lot cooler. I'm just switching back and forth. Good. Now this area is the same base color, the dark cadmium orange, and I'm going to darken it up with probably some scarlet or something like that. And this area right here is a lot brighter. It's more like this. It's like a shine. And then it's deeper in between. So let's just go ahead and add our dark cadmium orange all over, and we'll start darkening and lightening. Okay, now along that ridge, remember it's brighter. And then it fades right here. So we got to get lighter handed right over here. And then we want to be a little bit like medium heaviness over here. That causes this to look like it's recessed, like it's deeper, I guess, in the marble. So let's start with some deep scarlet red. And we're going to come in here, start at this end, and we're just going to add a light layer, because I'm not sure if I want this one just yet, but I think it will add to it if we use it. So let's add just a little bit. I think it might be a little too bright. We need a little bit more of a dull color. If I were using like a Prismacolor pencil, I'd probably be grabbing my oh, it's called Tuscan red. It's like a brownish red. I really like that color in those sets. And that would be like the perfect color for this. Let's do a little orange over top of that yellow. Tone it down just a little bit and mix a little bit of yellow again. Good. I like it. And then let's actually, I think I'm going to use, let's try some dark red. Let's try a little bit. That's a little bit darker. I like that one. So if you're looking to, we're going to have to fuzz these lines a little bit. It's not a hard edge. So let's go in with our dark red. Okay, and let's go a little bit into that yellow, just a little bit. And then bring this into here, and it's mixing really well with that deep scarlet red as well. Again, these are all warm colors, so they should do really, really well. We might have to shadow a little bit, maybe put some umber in there just to get it a little bit deeper, a little bit more muted, not so bright. So this edge here it's a little smoother, it's not a hard edge. So we need to come in and fuzz that line a little bit in between. So we're going to follow this line and we're going to do like small circles. We're just going to take that red and push it around into that yellow, and then also push some of this orange into the red so that it fuzzes it up a little bit. We need it to be a little bit smoother of a transition. And then you can even take some of your yellow and just get that a little bit of a colored back here and cross over a little bit into that red area. And you see how it fuzzed it just a touch. Looks good. Alright, let's actually, I'm going to get out some, let's see, what do I got? Let's use some Van Dyke brown. It's a little less intense than the umber, and we're just going to come in, and brown typically mixes really well with the red. And we'll just create more of a shadow in here. We want a little bit deeper of a value. This will also need to be a little bit more fuzzy right in here. So I'm going to push it into that orangey space there a little bit. And then let's use our dark red again in that Van Dyke brown, and I'm going to go very gently over the top of it with small circles. We don't want to get too sketchy with it. We want it to be smooth. These are little glass balls, so we want to make sure it looks nice and smooth. So it's always important, I mean, you don't have to, but I feel like it's important to keep in mind what you're actually coloring. If I get too sketchy with a glass ball, it's going to come out not looking like a glass ball. So it's important to me that I keep in mind what I'm actually creating. Something smooth, shiny, reflective, and that helps keep everything in perspective and keeps me going in a good direction rather than just kind of like all over the place. I feel like that looks pretty good. So now we have this beautiful yellow part. I feel like it's going to have some orange in there, but mostly yellow. So again, our base is going to be the dark cadmium yellow, and let's just go ahead and start. I know we have a lot of shadows over here, and we will get to those. Pastel mat will allow it. This is the much brighter. If you're using something like a Bristol board, if you're using like a Bristol paper or a smooth paper, you may have to work a little differently. Whenever I use Bristol, you have to like preserve those like whites before you go in with your black. Now I went through and did the black, and then I was putting gray on top, and then more black, and then gray, and then sometimes the Bristol doesn't allow for that. It doesn't have as much of a tooth as the pastel mat. The pastel mat is very unique, and it allows for tons of layers, and as you can see, you can go light on dark, and a lot of times if you're trying to do light on dark on Bristol, which is a good paper. It really is a good paper. You just have to work backwards. You have to like put your lights in first and work your way to the darks, and it's just different. But a lot of times if you're using the Bristol, you might burnish before you're actually finished, because you're trying to get that color to take, and the tooth really just doesn't take it that well. Okay, now I put a little more pressure right here just because I know that that is super bright. It's a very bright yellow. And then we're going to go ahead, maybe I'll do an orange. Maybe we'll do a little bit of orange in here just to deepen it a little bit. It's definitely still dominant yellow, and it's like a shaded yellow, so we don't want to color it like that. So kind of how we were doing on here, doing the base of the orange and lightly adding the yellow. Now we have a base of the yellow and we're lightly adding the orange. And let's look at what's happening down here. There's a little bit more orange down here. I'm probably going to end up using some browns, it looks like, and there might be some black right in here. Let's use some more of our Van Dyke, and let's bring it along here just a touch, and then we want to, so like also when you're using the brown over top of the yellow, we're creating a shadow, okay? And the thing about that is that you don't want to drown out that yellow. So you're being very light-handed about it. You want to gently put in that brown, but you still want it to be like dominant yellow. So that can be tricky, but it can be done. So don't get frustrated. Just add in a very light layer. And I'm being a little bit heavier on the pastel mat because the pastel mat will allow it. It's very thick. It doesn't indent as easily as other papers. And yeah, I can be a little bit heavier. But do you see how I'm adding the brown, but you can still see that hint of yellow behind it? That's what we want. We want it to look like a shadowed yellow and not just like, oh, there's brown, you know. It's just a big brown spot. No, we want it to look like yellow that's shadowed. So even mixing, let's put a little bit of the yellow over top of it, soften those lines. I'm using the circular motion to get a nice even fill. And you see it's mixing super well with that brown, and we're keeping it dominant yellow. It looks like a shadowed yellow. Doesn't look like there's just like dark areas of brown. Okay, I'm going to have a little bit heavier of a hand right here. If you look, there is a brighter area here, and then there's also a brighter area on the other side of it, but it only goes to like about here. And let's pop some black in there right in between, just a small amount, like right in here. Now, if you feel like that black is too overpowering, if you don't like it, go in with your Van Dyke brown again. And what you can do is on this side of the edge, just kind of push it around a little bit, make it a little smoother. You see how that does. It looks really nice. Make it go down here. And we're really starting to see it look more like a shadowed yellow. And it has some movement to it, just looks really good. Might have a little orange in here, so looks like we got some orange up in here as well. So here's some orange. That looks good. Might be a little separation here. Again, those are those tiny, tiny details that can be difficult to see at first. But the more you look, the more you see, the more you're gonna see. I'm looking over here to this spot. I keep seeing it, it's bothering me. So I have some dark red, and I'm going to cover this very gently, but then I want to add some more orange and mix it. I feel like it needed to be a little bit darker. And then we can add some more yellow over top of it. That looks better. There might be a little bit of yellow like up here. And don't be afraid to sharpen your pencil. If it needs it, sharpen it. If you're having trouble, sharpen it. So the colored part is pretty much done. So now we're like looking at the angles, you know, the roundness. This is where it can get tricky, because if you look up here in the picture, it's very, very black. It's almost non-existent of a color there. You can't even see the edges. They're like hidden. So we'll work on that as well. Let's go in. Let's actually go in with our black. Let's start there. I'm going to try to round up these edges a little bit and get them a little bit better. Sometimes, most times, it's really hard to get a perfect circle. And even though I did these in Procreate, I made my lines in Procreate, and then I traced them on here, you have the same exact picture that I do. And it's really hard by hand to get that circle perfect. So, okay, let's see. This is a line that's black. This is where the magic happens too. When you get these shines and everything just right, I mean, it just looks amazing. Okay, and I'm going to come in here, and what I'm going to end up doing is we're going to get a little creative. Since this is just a practice piece, it's just, let's just get a little bit creative with it. I'm going to try not to lose this outer line here so that I know where my marble is. I'm going to bring this all the way up here. And it looks like it actually comes like across, and then this is, it like meets over here. Don't worry too much about that. And then this whole edge, it seems, yep, it gets a little bit more gray down here. So it kind of comes along here. And we're just going to add a layer, because a lot of this is going to be black, and we're going to lighten it up as we go with some grays and just making it look like a nice round marble. And then probably what I'll do is we'll finish this, and then I'll do a faster version of this and talk over it if I need to talk about it. And then you can kind of go on your own and create that one. You can watch me do it too, and I'll do a little bit of voiceover work for you. But then that way you'll be able to kind of play around and get a feel for your pencils and try to create it. And of course, if you need any help, I'm usually around. So you can always message me. You can always find me on Facebook. I have some groups that are helping groups for colored pencil. you can message me or leave a comment, since this is YouTube, and I can always get back to you and direct you where you need to be. Okay, so I said let's get creative. So this top part, what I want to do is I want to take my, is this cold gray? I always get it messed up. So cold gray 4. And I'm just going to add it over top of the black. Now, I know it's not there. It's okay. This kind of stuff doesn't bother me. Whenever I'm having trouble and I can't see the edge, I feel like it's okay. This is also practice too, so it's not that big of a deal. But what we're going to do is we're just going to tone it down and just go over top of it with black. We're going to keep going back and forth and lightening it and darkening it just to give it a little bit of an edge, just a tiny bit, so that we can kind of see it on that black background. It's just going to be a little bit lighter of a black, I guess. And just keep switching back and forth until it reaches a point that you think it's good enough, and then we can move on. I think it's about there, because it's almost non-existent. You can almost not see it, and I like that. But it's not completely black, so it's not gonna like mess with you. Let's come in here too. Start about this edge and bring it. I'm going to bring it all the way across. So a lot of this is all really dark. It's not black, but we're going to base it in black and make a nice consistent base. I'm going to move around those really bright areas. Got a lot of grays in these areas, but again, I'm just going to stay consistent and do a light layer of the black. So I don't know what happened, but apparently in the middle of my instruction on this part, my microphone shut off and did not catch all of the instruction, but I'm going to redo it and it'll be fine. So here we are. I'm just putting a light layer on this area. I don't want to lose all of those nice guidelines, and I'm just keeping it light while still offering a nice dark background. Now I know this is sped up and it's only 2 times, so it's not as fast as you would see in any other of my videos that go super fast, but this one, I mean, we just kind of have to do what we have to do, right? Now using the warm gray 2, I'm going through and just lightening up some of those spots that are a little bit lighter. Warm gray 2 has a really nice brownish kind of undertone, so we'll come back over with this cold gray 4 and lighten them up even further. And we want to keep the middle there a little bit darker. We don't want to go over it too much. It is a little bit more of a darker gradient. And then get these edges sharpened up a little bit. This is a lot brighter over here. There is a shine, so I'm not going to move too much in that or have too much pressure. Now you want to pay close attention to all of these tiny little overlaps of color and shine, and then if you look inside these shine marks, you can also see a lot of different shapes. So yeah, pay attention to that. That is something that is super important. And then go through and make sure you darken those darker areas as well. And I'm just going through and gently adding this black, crisping up the sides of these lines. and working around those shine areas too. Those areas are quite fun to do. They're a little bit textured, so you're going to have a little fun playing with those. And then I want to put in a darker area right in here with my black. And I'm being light-handed. I'm not digging at the paper. I don't want it to be that much darker. It's just a nice little gradient. And then back to the cold gray 4. Putting in a few little lighter areas and blending that black just a little bit more. And then working my way around. Try to get all my shapes together here. And then also trying to get the marble more round. Really it is just like playing around. You're just trying to get some layers on there, trying to get the shapes, trying to get the right intensity. Gray can be really hard whenever it's on black because even though you're seeing this bright contrast, a lot of times it's really not that bright. It's, you know, just how we're seeing it. Our brain is telling us, and then sometimes we can make it too bright. So if you do that, you can go back through with your black. And then I overlapped a little bit here on the red and orange just to give it more of a three-dimensional feel. And this is also bright right here. There's a little shape here. I'm going to use the warm gray 2. And we're going to just brighten that up a little bit more. Using the warm gray 2, we're just going to go through this and add a little bit of some highlights here. Very fine tip here. Again, this is a really small piece, so we don't really have to do a whole lot of details unless you like the, you know, the very mini kind of portraits where it's you have to keep a really sharp point, which is also fine. And then I'm going to go through again with my white and just brighten up some of these brighter areas, the really bright stuff, and overlap over top of those grays and blend that out just a little bit further. And then these are a little bit bright too. And again, I'm so sorry that happened with my microphone. I really didn't want to do this so fast because it is such a fun video. I had a lot of things that we were talking about, well, that I was talking about, and it just fell through. So now onto these shines. These are interesting. So I just went through and based out with a little bit of black with some loose circles. Now this is the warm gray 2, and I'm going through and also doing loose circles around. I'm being very light-handed about it, and then going through and then using my white. I'm using like the loose circles, a little bit of stippling, and we're creating this shine that's textured. These marbles, they're smooth, but they kind of look like they've been through a dryer. Maybe they were played with and on cement or something. They're a little chewed up, but they're still really cool. So I'm going through and adding some stippling along with some loose circles, and that is creating this kind of chunky shine look. Some more stippling. Now, if you don't know what stippling is, it's just basically like spotting or tapping. You can call it tapping, but you're just kind of making dots. Oh, and I busted my pencil. If there's going to be a pencil that's going to break, it's probably going to be the white. I found that in Prismacolors. That's why I had to stop using them, as I was just so frustrated with the white. It just kept crumbling and crumbling. I don't have that much problem with the polys or anything like that, but I know the Prismacolors were very well known for that. And then we're going to do a shape up here. It almost looks like a V. And then, yeah, we'll just make our little V here. Put some more of our shine spots in. Blend them out on the sides. There's a little bit of stippling here. and down into the red and orange. I'm just blending that in and making a fun little shape. If you look at the shape, it looks, there's like a longer area. This is a pencil extender, and I actually had to shove paper down in the bottom of it because my pencils were getting way too short. This one's too short. So this is the Cold Gray 4, and I always forget the name, but this is the Cold Gray 4 anyway, and I stuck it in the pencil extender. So if you don't have a pencil extender, this is very useful, very helpful, and it will help you to extend your pencil's life and length for a little bit longer. Now there are different brands too, so this is the Generals, but there are all kinds of brands out there. And I'm just using this Cold Gray 4 now, and I'm just going through and blending out that black background. I want to have a softer gray in here, and not necessarily like a really bright gray, but something that's a little bit softer. So we're just sort of going through and adding a very light layer. And then also we have, if you look close enough, you can see some of these wacky lines that are in it look like they've been chewed on or something, but, and maybe it has been, but just even thinking about that gives me the chills. Like, I hate it. Anyway, we won't get into that, but yeah, just keep going through with your warm gray here, or your Cold Gray 4. And I always forget that this is Cold Gray 4. I don't know why. I just cannot remember the name. It's just crazy. In this area is a little bit like small circles, maybe a little bit of some random, you know, wider circles, looser circles. But yeah, we're just kind of creating more of a texture than anything, and then blending here and there. And of course, if you need to, go back through and darken it up, add some of that contrast. And then also, if you look at this shine, there is like a tiny little, almost like a V mark in here that's darker. It's like a scratch. So I went in with black, and then I went in with my Cold Gray 4, and then brightened it up with my white. And then just going and adding a few more highlights and blending out different colors just to make sure it looks right. So get your Van Dyke brown. We're going to start to shadow the orange and the yellow. So this part, it comes in real thick in the middle. Not thick, I don't want to say thick because I don't want you to think you have to press real hard, but just add a little layer here and start to darken this area up. You want to have that nice round feeling to it, so put a little arch on that as well. And then also let's do that for the yellow. Using the black, I'm going through and just darkening up some areas, getting them prepped to take color. Some Cold Gray 4 again. And just lightly, oh, okay, so there I was talking about the shine. The shine is going to be kind of like the ones above, but they're more like squared. So yeah, and now we're just putting a little bit of some black right here to darken up those shadows underneath, and then blending it out with our Cold Gray 4, just to create a little bit of a separation between the shadow shine on the ground and the marble. So when you're going over this now with the Cold Gray 4, I'm going to put a little bit around these, and you can go in them too a little bit. You don't want to overpower that part of the paper though with the gray. And then adding it to these shines on the sides, all the way up. And then slowly build this up just a little bit. We don't want a whole lot of gray here. It's very subtle. And we're going to tone it down a little bit with black. But see how you can still see it? Like we put the gray down and then we went over top of it with a little, just a touch of black. And this is darker in here, so. Pay close attention right here. There are some crazy wacky shapes in there. And now I'm going to use a warm gray 2, and I'm going to start basing these out a little bit. They're more like squares, so I'm going through and I'm like trying to watch my shape using a little stippling and making sure that we have like lines that are separate in between. If you look at it really closely, you can see that the whole shine part is like a square or it's like a rectangle, but it has like these separations in between. It's kind of splotchy. So we're using the stippling and we're using small circles a little bit, but we're also skipping over some areas to make sure that we have the space there for those lines that you can see through it. So let's add some of the shine on the yellow here, and it directly matches these shines here too. So we want to make sure that we get those on there in the right spot, and then use your black to go in between all of these nice little areas. And make our nice little subtle gray parts around. This is a really bright area here where the marbles are touching each other. So make sure you get those shines and don't forget the specks that are in there. And then we need to blend that just a little bit more. There are some crazy shapes in this area too. I was trying to look at it, and I don't know if I'm seeing a door or something on the other side of it, but there's lines, there's all kinds of just wacky things happening in there. So you can either make them up or you can look at it really close and do what the picture says, and that's up to you. Sometimes in areas like this, I like to take like just like the artistic point, just like going through and making stuff up and making it my own. So, and it's not that big of an area, so nobody really notices. Okay, so now we're using our dark cadmium orange and dark cadmium yellow, and I'm going through and just adding a nice wash over this and lightening it up a little bit with the white. So now we are on, this is the one that was supposed to be fast. So now we are on to the second one, and I'm going to follow the same techniques as we did in the first. I'm going to base out with my black. There's a few new colors to this one, which would be the dark indigo and also the raw umber. But we're just going to start out now by looking at where all of our dark points are, and we're going to map them out. So it might be just a little bit, and then we'll start with our red and orange and yellow down below. Now with the dark cadmium orange, we're going to base it out just like we did with our one on the right. Same process. There are some lighter areas in this and there are some darker areas. You will need your dark red and your yellow. Let's get the lighter areas first. Take it all the way to the side. And then also in the middle, because there is a little bit of a recess here or lump. It's kind of a swirl, I guess. I just blend all that out, come back with the yellow, make sure that it's blending out properly, adding some more yellow to it, and then we'll jump back to the dark red. And then I'm going to add a little bit of the Van Dyke brown in here for the shadow. So just bounce back and forth in between those colors until you reach something that you are proud of, that you like, that you're satisfied with. Next, we're going to jump up here and we're going to start again with our dark cadmium orange. And basically we're going to follow the same steps. The only difference in this one is that I believe that I used that deep scarlet red along with the other colors, the Van Dyke and the dark red. Using the deep scarlet red, we blended it in with that dark cadmium orange, and now we're just using the orange again to blend out some of that bright red. Again, lightening up with our dark cadmium yellow on the edges that it says is lighter. And then we're going to blend it back out. This is the dark red. And see, it's a little bit darker than the orange. It's a little bit darker than that deep scarlet. So we're going to just add some of these values in here. And then we will also use our Van Dyke. After you've reached a point that you like what you have here, you can go ahead and switch to your black and we'll start working on some other areas. So I sharpened my pencil and I wanted to get this edge over here a little bit more toothy. It has a little bit more of a texture, it's kind of wacky, and then also we needed to round up our top a little bit, and I added a little bit of the cold gray 4 along with the Van Dyke and then darkened with the black. Let's add our specks in here, look at those shapes, make sure you take note and that you draw them how you see them. Now this area is a little different. It's more brown than anything. I wanted to base it out in orange though, and then come back over it with my Van Dyke, and then we're going to use some raw umber and yellow as well, just to get it to a better point. It's not super dark brown, but we want to make sure, and it does look good in the end. Let's base this part out in yellow, the dark cadmium yellow to be exact. Towards the top of it I was a little less, I used a little less pressure though, because it blends a little bit too with the brown. Adding a little bit of yellow in with the brown, a little bit more of the Van Dyke, and then let's use our raw umber. It's like that yellowy kind of brown. It's a little bit lighter of a brown. And then darken up the areas around it with the black. So just jump back and forth in between these colors until you feel comfortable moving on. Make sure you take note on the color changes as well as the value changes, and really just look at those things honestly, and the shape of them as well. That will help you tremendously. So I'm going to work on this area for a little bit longer, and then we're going to move on. So you can keep watching this, but I'm going to stay here for a little bit and then we'll move on. So working our way down through now to this side, we've moved on. We've done a lot of blending up above. We're going to continue this yellow streak, putting a base of yellow, adding some more of our orange just like before, watching where the darks and the lights are, and then blending them all together. Now I found this area probably my favorite, my most favorite. We based it out with the raw umber, and then use some Van Dyke to darken it up, and it's going to be like more black up top, but I use this, and if you look at the shapes, there's like these waves inside of it. So you've got highs and lows, and it was just a really interesting area. Plus it's a different color. So I'm not sure what made that color, because it's like a orange and a red and red and yellow. You know, I'm not really sure, but down below we end up putting in some blue with the grays. So now I'm going through with my black. I'm darkening up the edges to make sure that I have that separation. And watch your brain doesn't go on autopilot here, because sometimes your brain thinks it knows what it wants. And sometimes that's not exactly what you see. Okay, and now let's move on to some warm gray too. And I'm going to just add some of these brighter spots in here, the highs and the lows. These are like those waves that you see in there. And then we're going to add some down in here because it's a little bit brighter. And then kind of make those edges a little bit, not, you don't want them straight, so you want them a little bit toothy, a little bit off, you know. Some more raw umber to blend. Make those highs and lows. And then some warm gray 5. Just blending all those areas together. So I added a little bit of the blue in there, and you're going to love this. So take some orange and put it right here. This is going to show that that orange continues behind this shine, and then go over top of it a little bit with your warm gray too. I love that that orange is there. And then use your black to make like the little pinholes that you can see in the glass. That's inside that wave of color. Some more Van Dyke brown in this area. This area is the dark indigo and the Van Dyke brown. And I use the Van Dyke down towards the black, and then I put the blue on top. And then we blend them together. So I'm trying to get rid of that line. And then using my cold gray too. And I'm just lightening that blue and then darkening it back up again. And blending it into that Van Dyke brown. Some more raw umber on this side. We're going to add some orange and yellow, and then use our white to brighten some things up, because this is a really bright area over here. And we'll just keep working and look at those little tiny shapes. So working down around the bottom using the cold gray 4 and also the Van Dyke just to create that separation there. And now I'm using the raw umber, just adding a little bit down here and then across this whole way. This is a nice base. And these are also really bright too. So we use the white and then come back around with our a little bit more raw umber. Be very light-handed and just kind of go around these shiny areas. So if you haven't started finding a pattern yet, you're kind of bouncing back and forth between the dark cadmium yellow, the dark cadmium orange, and just kind of going in between with browns and reds and really just trying to smooth out all of that and make it blend. And then of course coming back through with our black and adding, you know, the finer details with the edges and all that. So this is all based out in the raw umber, and I'm going back over top of it with the dark cadmium orange. It gives it this really nice, almost like a coppery feel. It's not so bright, but it's not like super dark either. And if you look in this area too, there are some lines in that and some marks, some odd marks. So I went through with my yellow and started just recreating them. And if you're losing your lines in here, use the black to crisp them back up. You could probably also use maybe a walnut brown if you didn't want to use black. That would be fine too. Some more cold gray 2. No, cold gray 4. Sorry. I cannot remember that pencil. I don't know why. It's just the weirdest thing. Bouncing back and forth in between the reds. We're on the final stretch, so wanted to add a little bit more depth up in here using some dark red and adding a little bit in there as well, just to give it a little bit more color, make it a little more interesting. And then the Van Dyke to tone it down. Some more of the raw umber. And then of course our white shines down here. Adding a little bit of black in here just to give it a little bit more of a separation, fading out some of those browns and oranges, and then separating the side here from the table and the reflections. Blending out these edges. And then working in these really bright areas, trying to tone down the edges a little bit further. And I use the raw umber here as the base for this shine on this side here. I think it looks really good. And then just blending everything. Now you can also add some more of that dark indigo and it would look right. I did add some in a lot of the areas in this marble. The other one I didn't use any blue at all. Then make sure you get your brightest brights in there as the shine. They all sort of match each other. You've got kind of all these lights on them, and now I'm just going through and adding the shapes. So we're almost done with this. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm just going through and adding all of my little shines. So watch your shines. That's the biggest thing, I guess, right now, is looking at your shapes of your shines, where they're at in relation to all the shapes inside of the marble. I hope you've enjoyed it. I really hope that you post this on the helper page. That would be fantastic, on Facebook. I'd love to see what you did under my instruction, and I hope you learned some things. And if you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe, and I'm hoping to do some more, just like always. And if you're looking for some deeper instruction, I do have the Patreon. So happy creating.